So tonight, the objectives are basically to have a better understanding of how nutrition impacts health throughout the menopause transition and beyond, to gain knowledge of the key nutritional needs during this phase, and provide practical tips to improve your diet and nutrition. Why menopause nutrition matters? These are all pretty obvious, and I think they're probably well known to you since you're showing up tonight. It increases well-being and physical function across the lifespan. It reduces the risk of common age-related problems, obesity, heart disease, diabetes. Nutritional needs and practices may shift and are ever evolving in the literature and research. Old practices no longer work as expected in this time of life. There's increased stress and life transitions, which we've talked about in a number of different sessions, and that can impact nutrition and overall health and well-being. And symptoms may be impacted by what we are actually ingesting in our nutrition. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Alison Dumont. Hi. She actually designed this logo for us, the Women's Health Hub, Gather, Educate, and Empower, and I love it so much, and I hope we will use it moving forward as a representation of our little, or big group, I should say. Who's giggling? What, did I miss a joke?
No, we said the boobs aren't saggy enough.
Alison, the boobs aren't saggy enough. In addition to being a good friend of mine personally, Alison Dumont is an active member of Muskoka's healthcare community. She provides holistic nutritional counseling to individuals and public education throughout this region. She studied health sciences at Western and the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. She is a small-scale organic farmer, runner, and triathlete. She is raising 2 teenagers, has a close relationship with her rescue golden, Bruno, dark chocolate, and red wine. Alison believes that the foundation of wellness is education and empowerment. So again, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Alison Dumont up.
Oh, yeah. Good. I was thinking today, one of the other things I should be putting on my CV is like, I am also perimenopausal, so I feel like that kind of matters in this environment here. So I want to thank Maggie and Lindsay and Angie, who will be here later, for creating this safe space for us women to become educated and empowered. So being a holistic nutritionist, what that means, the nutrition part is pretty self-explanatory. I help people with figuring out their food. But the holistic part of that is I also help people figure out what is meaningful to them and all the other aspects of what makes up our health. So that is lifestyle, exercise, but also things like mindfulness and a sense of worthiness and that like elusive balance that we all hear about. Some of what I share with you today might resonate deeply, and that's great. Some of what I say maybe you don't agree with, and that's okay. Like with all things, please take what tracks for you and leave the rest. I am sharing information with you from a very specific lens of holistic nutrition, which does involve good science, but also involves my professional experience, some personal experience, and a lot of critical thinking, and a lot of common sense. And what I mean by common sense is that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to health. Yeah, we each have different needs for our energy depending on our activity level. We have, some of us, maybe some food sensitivities. We definitely have different food preferences and aversions and lifestyle preferences and aversions. So to me, it's common sense that taking one approach to our health isn't going to work for everyone. I have also discovered that there's a real risk when we rely too heavily on one specific lens to look at our health. For example, when we rely on just anecdotal evidence. So like my mother-in-law's neighbor's cousin said, oh, I know this one thing, it really helps me with my sleep, and then before I know it, my cupboard is full of like products that I bought on Facebook or something, right? And likewise, it's not a good thing if we rely too heavily just on science. That is a specific lens. And the reason is that it's just not possible to have studies on everything. So yeah, especially women, good point. I think back to when Dr. McMillan said to us a few sessions ago that there are no studies to support the efficacy of melatonin as a sleep aid. Almost directly followed by her saying, and it works really well for my daughter, right? I want to take a look at this. I apologize, it's a little bit hard to see. This is my own copy that I took and I laminated and then took a picture of and thought it would work really well on a big screen. So this resource here was provided to a patient of the University Health Network. So that is currently the 3rd ranked hospital in the world. So we're talking Toronto General, Toronto Western, and Princess Margaret. So kind of a big deal, right? And this is the letterhead right here. And this was given to a patient. He was a 63-year-old man diagnosed with congestive heart failure, and he was put on the heart transplant list, but was told in the meantime he needed to adopt a low potassium diet. So he was given this resource sheet to help him learn what foods to choose and which ones to avoid. So let's take a look here. Starting with the foods to avoid, we can say this patient is to avoid, on here, Lucky Charms. That makes sense, right? You want to avoid your Lucky Charms. That sounds good. I like that. Okay, avoid oatmeal. That's too bad a little bit. Avoid wild rice. Oh, bummer. Avoid barley, buckwheat, any nuts and seeds. Oh man. Okay, well then let's take a look instead at what foods are under the choose category. So up here, the first thing, we've got plain bagels. All right. White bread. Not my favorite. Let's see what else here. Alphabets. Captain Crunch. Fruit Loops, Frosted Flakes. Let's see over here. Pound cake. Shortbread, sponge cake, sugar cookies.
I can live with this.
That sounds all right. Down here, let's see. Avoid molasses, avoid maple syrup. Avoid cappuccinos. Okay, I guess. So choose instead. Choose corn syrup, Kool-Aid, and drink crystals. Thank you for that reaction. That was like so what I was going for, just like horror in the audience. You're with me, I like it. The kicker is that this patient was diabetic. So he was being treated through a very narrow scientific lens that focused exclusively on his heart chemistry. This is not a holistic approach, is kind of my point. He was my dad. So he did receive a heart transplant, but he died a few months later. And I suppose it would be prudent for me to tell you that shortly after I took this document from the folder on his stand next to his hospital bed at Toronto General, I decided to quit my 16-year career and I went back to school to study holistic nutrition. Thank you. I will present good science to you today. But just as importantly, we are going to talk a lot of common sense. And I hope that that allows you to make decisions about what's best for your menopause transition in a holistic way. So a little word from our girl, Jen Gunter. Basically, the science of nutrition is challenging, and sometimes studies raise more questions than they answer. But that is also the meandering path of science. The problem is, most of us, doctors included, want a nice tidy answer about food. Yeah? Dr. McMillan mentioned not learning much, if anything, in med school about how to support women through a perimenopause transition. And I was kind of in the same boat. I didn't really feel like I was well equipped. And what I found when I was preparing for today is that there's a lot of misinformation out there. Even amongst those who we think of as authorities in the realm of women's health, they're presenting us with conflicting evidence. And it gets very confusing. So I came back to my philosophy as a healthcare practitioner to make the fewest recommendations that are likely to make the biggest difference. Sometimes we leave the office of various healthcare practitioners with really like idyllic plans and programs, and sometimes even like a small pharmacy of like pills or supplements, and all with the greatest of intentions. But this can leave us feeling overwhelmed, and when that happens, sometimes we drop everything and just hit the red wine and the ketchup chips with a vengeance, right? Or maybe that's just me. We are inundated with so much information that we end up just throwing our hands up in the air and saying, like, I don't know what to think anymore. And I think oftentimes we're left with the impression that it's a lot more complicated than it has to be. I have a system here. Okay, here we go.
In the face of overwhelming odds, I'm left with only one option. I'm gonna have to science the shit out of this.
No matter what disease or disorder I am studying up on at the time, I always come to a very consistent conclusion that the best approach for just about every single one of them is a solid foundation of nutritional basics. We all need to eat lots of vegetables and fruit, some protein, some healthy fats, and included in all of that is going to be a whole ton of fiber. Some forms of nutritional counseling involve a whole lot of weighing and measuring and calculating and counting, and that is an approach. It might work for some, but my professional approach is rooted in having a healthy relationship with food, and I don't think that includes numbers. Granted, this leaves some people feeling like, well, how do I know if I'm getting enough, and feeling kind of unsure. But from a holistic nutrition point of view, I will always come back to the basics to answer that question. So what I guess I'm saying is that for most of us, and in most cases, we don't need to science the shit out of it. Okay. There are 12 topics that I am dying to discuss with you. But I was given 30 minutes, and even that, I could not make the math work. So I chose 4 of them to review with you tonight. And those are calcium, dairy, and bone health, gut health and hormones, stress and digestion. You'll see I really start lighting it up when I talk about that. It's my favorite. And protein, because that's a bit of a hot topic right now. The other 8 topics I think are super important as well, so you'll be receiving a resource sheet in follow-up email from the from the group. And the format that I'm going to use tonight is a 5-point format here. And it's going to start with, number one, why are we talking about this in the first place? I'm going to address why this is so confusing. Hopefully I'll be able to bring some clarity about this topic. We're going to land with a bottom line, and then ultimately I'm going to offer you kind of a practical takeaway that if you think, yeah, that kind of resonates, maybe you give that a try. Throughout the talk, I'm going to keep coming back to our touchstone. The touchstone is really a mindset. So a mindset of consistency, joy, and nutrient density. I have never seen somebody achieve consistency in their life sheerly through self-discipline. I know I've actually had conversations with some of you recently even about this. We can all push for a while, but what keeps us there? If you want to make healthy changes, drop the things that you think you should be doing and choose instead the things that really make sense to you and make you feel good. Those are self-reinforcing. And then, even better, if you can incorporate joy, if you can ask yourself, like, how can I make this more fun? This is basic psychology. Humans are really not that complicated, psychologically speaking, when it comes to the fact that anything that is joyful is self-reinforcing. And then finally, nutrient density. Restrictive eating is not sustainable. It is really the crux behind why diets are very yo-yo-y. Yeah? I work with the mindset of getting nutrients in rather than focusing on all the things that we're like supposed to cut out. When we're filled up with nourishment, the other foods naturally get crowded out. And then when we choose to indulge, that's called balance. Yeah. So what is nutrient density? So if we picture a can of Coca-Cola, I think we can probably all agree there's not a whole lot of nutrients offered in a can of Coca-Cola, but there's a certain amount of energy, right, in the form of calories. But it doesn't bring anything along with it, right? Those are empty calories, so to speak. So if we think instead about maybe like an apple and a handful of almonds. So we have about the same amount of energy in there, but it brings along with it like vitamin C and calcium, fiber, healthy fats. So that's what we're looking at when we talk about nutrient density, is focusing on the things that can really bring us what we're looking for and not focusing on restriction. Basic psychology supports this moving from a negative reinforcement pattern to a positive reinforcement pattern. So if you take nothing else away from tonight, just two things. One, my overarching message is that humans as a species thrive on a diet predominantly of whole vegetables and fruits, some protein, and some healthy fats. And the second thing is, you're probably doing better than you give yourself credit for. One last thing before I get into our 4 topics for tonight. I want to take a little aside to talk about the one topic that was not on my list of 12. But it might be a bit of an elephant in the room for some of us, and that is perimenopausal weight gain. Just about every nutrition guide addresses or sometimes even exclusively focuses on weight loss. Even our esteemed Mary Claire Haver, well known on Instagram, writes about what's going to whittle your waistline and how to redistribute your body fat so that you're a little more proportional. What does that mean? I'm going to offer you a bit of a mindset shift as both a healthcare practitioner and a feminist woman whose own body is in the midst of change. In women of our age, the shifting and increase of body fat that occurs during perimenopause is not pathologic. It does not require dietary or medical intervention. What I find confounding is the amount of strategy being put into counteracting a natural physical shift in women's bodies during this phase in our lives. This should be considered as ludicrous as if we were to create a special diet for pubescent boys to reverse their development of body hair and muscle mass and the lowering of their voices. Those are natural physiologic changes. As is the shifting of our bodies during perimenopause. So why aren't we embracing our changes the way that we celebrate other genders' changes? The quest to fight natural changes to our bodies is a sad reflection of societal pressures for women to stay small, youthful, and palatable for visual consumption. And I won't have a part in that, so I am not going to talk about it further than just to say, I see you, and I think your new shape is beautiful. So why are we talking about calcium and dairy and bone health? I think the main reason is that we're actually a bit scared. These numbers here are concerning. Perimenopausal women lose bone at a rate from 2 to 3% per year. This has me calculating how many years do I have before I'm a pile of goo. About 80% of those living with diagnosed osteoporosis are women. That's just unfair. And I think maybe many of us actually know of an older woman who has maybe had something like a hip fracture from a fairly minor fall. We're provided with facts like these, and we quickly conclude that we need to get more calcium to prevent this from happening to us. But there's one thing on this slide that I want you to pay particular attention to. We are not low in calcium. We are experiencing lower levels of calcium absorption, and we're going to come back to that and talk more about that. Of all the topics that I'm going to review tonight, milk and calcium and bone health is the one with the greatest amount of conflicting scientific literature. I'm a bit of a nerd and I love this stuff, so I actually gathered a collection of scientific statements that pretty directly negate each other. I had fun with that. I wish I had time to share those with you tonight because they're kind of astounding. But suffice it to say that if you find this subject confusing, take comfort in the fact that even the medical world itself has not come up with a steady position. Okay, so something we know. We've been told this, we hear it, we see it all across the literature. For women in our stage of life, the recommendation is 1,200 milligrams of calcium per day. But here's where it gets risky when we only look through that scientific numeric lens. We can think, okay, if I get that amount into me, then I'm solid. Pun intended. But here's where the data was consistent. There is an inverse relationship between calcium intake and calcium absorption. So essentially, the more you take in, the less of what we're taking in is actually usable. Again, not fair. The data was also consistent in that excess intake of calcium increases a woman's risk of heart attack and kidney stones. So suddenly the appeal to take a couple of 600 over-the-counter calcium pills a day to go nailed it, hit my goal, no problem, right? And that's my insurance policy against getting osteoporosis. Suddenly that is less appealing, yeah? On the resource sheet, that you'll get in your email, I've included examples of where you can find calcium in really nutrient-dense foods. So my favorites are broccoli, dark leafy greens, beans, seeds and nuts, tofu. If you enjoy sardines, have at her. Some supplementation is okay, but honestly, if you are focusing on nutrient-dense foods, you are likely hitting your mark. You're going to notice on the list of calcium sources that I'll provide you with that milk is not on there. Milk is a very complex subject nutrition-wise. A lot of research has been funded by, surprise, the dairy industry. So sorting best evidence from bias can be really challenging. One thing is clear though. Milk intake is not effective at reducing rates of osteoporosis. And another consideration is that a study that followed over 52,000 women over an 8-year span linked 1 glass of milk a day to a 50% increase in risk of breast cancer. It is notable that the increase in risk, and this is newer research, did not seem to be linked to the estrogen levels in the milk, as once assumed. But instead, it's a sugar molecule called D-galactose. Doesn't matter. Cheese and yogurt do not have these same levels of D-galactose in them. And research shows us that cheese and yogurt do not have a negative effect on hormonally sensitive cancers. A little bit of clarity. For every reason under the sun, another pun intended here, we need a lot of vitamin D. It is involved in almost every bodily function in our bodies. We've known that for a long time. What's important when talking about calcium is that it is also imperative for increasing calcium absorption. Yes. Ultimately, for bone health and aging women, there is one very consistent conclusion throughout the literature, and that is weight-bearing exercise as being the most effective. HRT had some pretty impressive stats too, but that's for somebody else's talk, so I had to sneak that in. My family and I eat a brick of tofu with our dinner at least once or twice a week. Yeah, it's great for calcium intake. That's not really the reason that I eat it. My main motivator is that it's really economical, and I have no idea how my kids are ever going to be able to afford to move out with the cost of living and groceries, so I'm teaching them how to make really delicious tofu. I actually brought my favorite recipe with me here tonight if you want to have a sample and see if this is something that kind of maybe is a fit for you. I told you that I don't like associating food and numbers, but there is something kind of interesting that I thought I wanted to point out. 868 milligrams per cup of calcium per cup of tofu. Milk has 305 milligrams. I just find this a little bit helpful in my critical thinking about where we're getting our information about the importance of dairy when considering calcium and bone health. Who told us that? Gut health and hormones. Anecdotally, I have witnessed a fairly high correlation in my professional experience between women developing gastrointestinal symptoms and the entering of perimenopause. I have a hunch about it, that there is a link to this being the time in our lives where there is a confluence of so many stressors, and we talked about those stressors. We all put our hands up and shouted them out during the session on menopause and stress. Stress has a major impact on digestion. And also Angie asked me to speak about it, so I thought, there must be a reason. And I am very much in the early stages of my understanding about the link between the human microbiome and hormones. So I did some digging. A pretty big portion of my client base is women in their 40s and 50s who struggle with things like IBS, acid reflux, chronic constipation. So I actually felt pretty good about my skill level digging into the literature on gut health and hormones so I could make good sense of it for you. But humbly, I have to admit I was experiencing this cognitive bias called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Do you know what that is? The more I learned, the less confident I became in what I knew. This is also a relatively new area in medicine, and there's not much in the way of good conclusive evidence. Some clarity, not much. What I did learn is that in addition to the gut microbiome having a major impact on overall health, which we've known for a while, right? Such as mediating our immune system, producing about 90% of our serotonin, but also that a good portion of that flora, called the estrobolome, is something that helps maintain circulating estrogen in the bloodstream rather than it being excreted. I legit did not know that. But what does it mean? Overall, healthy guts mean more stable hormones. Okay, can you guess by now where I'm going with the bottom line? Right back to focusing on nutrient-dense foods. We can all likely name probiotic foods. They're in the grocery store, everywhere. Everything says probiotic crackers, right? Probiotic pasta, everything's probiotic right now. These good probiotic products directly positively impact gut health by bringing in good bacteria. But how much of that is transient? How do we get them to take up residency in our bodies? I've come to understanding that feeding the good guys is underestimated, and for that we need prebiotic foods. That means the things that feed the good bacteria in our microbiome in our guts. And not a big surprise, these are your basic veggies and fruits and whole grains. No need to overscience anything here, right? Garlic, onions, bananas, asparagus, just to name a few of the kind of heavy hitters in prebiotics. When we come back to the touchstone of nutrient density, we will end up with a healthy estrobolome and improved hormone regulation. Oh, I call these here my emergency kits. So I line up my Tupperware containers on the counter, and I just empty my fridge, fruits, vegetables, and I do a big prep. And I just pile them in. Fruits and vegetables, they can mingle. It's okay. And I line them up in my fridge like that so that when I'm heading out the door, I can throw one of these into my day bag, and inevitably at some point I get hangry and I increase my intake of my whole vegetables and fruits. Easy. Maybe something to consider if that tracks for you. Also, as a side note, please eat your fruit. Oh. Assistant, please. Thank you.
I did is I was starting to eat fruit instead of candy, and I told someone that, and they were like, "You got to be careful with fruit. There's a lot of sugar in fruit." I was like, "Well, I'll let you know when we hit that point." You know, it's like, let me meet your fat fruit friends. I'd love to meet them.
Yeah. It's goofy. It's okay. The next slide is he says, "I want to see the girl who can't fit through the door because she's addicted to pineapple." Ooh, stress and digestion. Yes. When we look at any health issue, in my opinion, it's important to look a few layers deeper to find out what's really going on. When somebody is told that they have low iron, it seems quick fix and very easy, we give them an iron supplement. Or if somebody says they have acid reflux, it seems to make sense to give something to reduce their stomach acid. But these sorts of problems beg the question, why is this happening? I will venture to say, and I'll stand tall as I say it, the majority of human illness is rooted in the gastrointestinal system. That's not a unique thought. But can you see why I'm most passionate about this subject? Calcium absorption, your guts. Hormone regulation, your guts. The digestive system is highly sensitive to stress. So that's why we're talking about it. We've all heard the expression, you are what you eat. But I challenge that. From the beginning of the tract, your mouth, to the end of your tract is a tube. What is in that tube is not really inside of you. It doesn't matter how gorgeously you eat, if you are not breaking down and assimilating your food, it isn't in you yet. It goes out the other end. So rather, it's not you are what you eat, but you are what you digest and absorb. Only once food is adequately broken down can it travel through the barrier of the small intestine and become the building blocks that your organs use to manufacture what it needs. Cells to heal a wound, some thyroid hormone, some muscle in response to that great workout you just did. Another idea we've been given is that there is such a thing as the mind-body connection, and that's simply not true. Let me explain. I saw some raised eyebrows. Each time you have a thought or experience an emotion, there is a cascade of physiologic events that occur throughout the body. It's all chemistry. They're not connected, they are the same thing. Ali, a couple of sessions ago, did a wonderful job educating about how the nervous system works, and I want to build on that by explaining how the nervous system affects our digestion. So we've heard of fight and flight versus rest and digest. When we are genuinely calm and feeling safe, it is only then that our parasympathetic nervous system is turned on, and then it can signal the digestive process. So just like when we see a delicious piece of chocolate cake and we salivate, the lining of our stomach does the same thing. It's almost like it salivates. It secretes digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid so that we can break our food down. It's as though it's salivating. When we eat and we're feeling stressed, we're in a sympathetic state. No digestion. So maybe some of you have noticed that food can feel like it's sitting like a brick in your stomach. This usually results in those deep burps, like the ones that feel like they're coming from your belly button. Indigested food then travels through the intestines, and unhealthy bacteria grows and off gases. What do we experience? Gas and bloating. Okay, so I get frustrated every time I look for like an anatomic diagram to do one of my tests. It's always men. But alas, okay. So if we're going to talk about the digestive system, no, I can't deal with this. I got to fix it. Let me see here. There. It's a little better. Our digestive system does not start with the mouth as we would imagine. Our digestive system starts with our nervous system, as we've talked about, and then our eyes and our nose. Because if we are not excited about the food that we're going to eat, if it doesn't feel joyful and lovely and nourishing, our digestive system is not on board. Then our digestive system moves to the mouth. So this is where we chew our food. It's really important to chew your food because you don't have teeth in your stomach. This is our only opportunity to mechanically break our food down as a process of digestion. We also have our saliva, which has some enzymes in it that start down the chemical breakdown of our food. The food travels down our esophagus and into our stomach. We see all these nice little folds here that are lined with parietal cells. Doesn't matter. They are secretory cells, which means that these are the ones that are secreting the hydrochloric acid and the enzymes that help to break our food down. When we are stressed, that system's not working. The food sits there like a brick in our stomach. Once the food, hopefully, is nicely digested chemically there, it starts traveling down into this mess of spaghetti, our small intestines, where there are more enzymes that are released, and our wonderful, healthy bacteria start to break that food down into the most microscopic little bits that then can travel through the barrier of the small intestine into our bloodstream. Then it's in you. Then our body is using those little building blocks, once it's in the bloodstream, to take little bits of this and that and build up all the things that we need. The food then travels from here into the large intestine or the colon, up, over, down, and out through the rectum. The water-soluble vitamins and much of our hydration comes from absorption of water and vitamins in this section of the travels, and then we have waste out the other end. So that's just a really quick, basic overview of digestion from our lovely Madame here. So if we sit with that thought for a moment, that your stress level impacts your ability to use the food you eat, we maybe then ask ourselves, how often am I actually calm when I'm eating? Are you even really hungry? When you sincerely feel hunger, that's a good sign that your body is ready for food. The digestive juices are flowing, and this only happens when we're in that parasympathetic state. But we have to pay attention to our body's cues. I have a sister, Julie, and we've done a lot of camping trips together, canoeing in the backcountry, and she never takes off her watch. And I said to her, "So, Jules, are you hungry? Do you want dinner?" She goes, "Well, I don't know. What time is it?" We have to listen to our bodies. One thing I hear a lot from clients in this stage of life, and this is an important differentiation, is that they experience cravings, but not really hunger. And so for me, these kind of cravings look like eating a whole sleeve of Premium Plus crackers while I'm creating a gorgeous, healthy dinner for the rest of my family. Does that sound familiar? All over the world, across many cultures, religions, traditions, there is a long history of humans taking some kind of pause before eating. Whether in prayer or gratitude or mindfulness, humans have taken a moment to transition their bodies before eating. In recent years, in our culture, we've stopped doing that. We eat while we watch the news. Stressful. We eat while we're driving from work to school to soccer practice. We eat between patients when we're already running 20 minutes behind. Find your parasympathetic nervous system. Land in your body, as Ali tells us. It's then that your body can use food to keep you healthy. My very most favorite resource that I recommend to clients to help really build a good foundation of education about how the body works and doesn't work related to stress is called Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle, and it's written by these fabulous twin sisters, Emily and Amelia Nagoski, who are highly academic but have written this book in a very accessible way. I brought it with me today, and along actually with a number of my other books on this topic from my personal library, so you can poke through them if you like. Did I already say I also brought the tofu for you to try? Yeah, okay, good. It's back there too, so we can go have some fun. Okay, a protein. The reason we're talking about protein tonight is actually the same reason that we talked about calcium. There is a lot of fear about becoming weak and injured, and there's a lot of misinformation. And as I mentioned, it's also quite a hot topic. I think my Instagram algorithm has figured out my age, and I am inundated with message about how I need to get enough protein. There are so many reels of women saying that trying to get enough protein has felt like a part-time job. Do you remember the low-fat diet of like the 80s and 90s? I feel now when I go into the grocery store, like it seems like we're in a kind of a high protein fad. Protein in everything. But just like we believed we could draw a straight line between bone health and calcium intake, I think we've concluded that in order to stay strong, we need copious amounts of protein. Follow me through this logic. High protein intake is often used in weight loss. Weight loss diets, yeah? Weight loss diets target perimenopausal women. For these two reasons, protein and perimenopause have become enmeshed. And this leaves us with the belief that we need to do so much more than we really need to when it comes to getting protein into our bodies. Don't get me wrong, there are many reasons that we want to get enough protein. Eating protein in a meal helps to slow the uptake of the carbohydrate or the sugars, and that helps to maintain steady blood sugar levels. It helps to keep us feeling satiated longer. Steady blood sugars helps to keep low cortisol levels. Protein breaks down into little building blocks, right? The amino acids, and our body can then use those as raw materials to maintain muscle, absolutely, but also when we're talking about overall health, to manufacture many other things that our bodies need, like thyroid hormone or melatonin, right, our sleep hormone. And just like enough calcium is good, but more than adequate isn't healthy and can actually be dangerous, the same is true for protein. I have often been asked, what is the best source of protein and how can I get enough? And the truth is, no matter which way I try to look at it, I always end up coming up with the same answer, that a generally healthy diet that includes the nutritional basics is best. And trust me, I wish that I had some really special formula with some cute little acronym that would make me like a commodity in the perimenopause world, but it just doesn't exist. Have you seen those funny memes of the women who just like are gnawing on like sausage after sausage, like trying to hit their protein goal in a day? Overconsumption of protein is hard on the liver. And the liver has to process all of those excess amino acids. And that is a process that produces a lot of dirty metabolites. And I'm not saying that there is a direct correlation, but I would be remiss not to share that in my 8 years of nutritional counseling, I have definitely noticed a high occurrence of women who about 2 to 3 years after being on some sort of high protein, low carb diet have had to have their gallbladders removed. Your gallbladder is an important organ. It's important that we don't think of protein as a fuel source for these reasons. Humans, as a species, are best fueled by carbohydrates. That is not an opinion. Carbs are the most effective and cleanly burning source of fuel. And when I say carbs, I'm not talking about white rice and butter tarts, although I wish I were. I am talking about nutrient-dense broccoli and grapefruits and steel-cut oats. I'm going to explain more about this in the carbohydrate section of your resource sheet that you get. But the bottom line here is to make sure that you are getting some protein. And if you feel like hitting your protein goal is your second job, I am telling you, you can happily retire. Use the touchstone of nutrient density when choosing your protein sources. So I have an example here. Eating a whey-based protein bar may give you about 15 to 20 grams of protein, but not a whole lot else in there, yeah? If you choose instead to have a couple of hard-boiled eggs, you're getting at least that same amount of protein, but also you are getting loaded with the B vitamins. That's what makes the yolk bright yellow. And these are the ingredients that allow your body to actually use the protein. See, we don't need like scientifically formulated packaged products. We need food. Yeah, this, remember Julie? My sister, won't take off her watch. She's a grade 2 teacher down in the city. So you have to picture a 4'8" energetic ball of, how can I make your day better? And Julie is a box ticker offer. I love her dearly. And she works pretty diligently with her Glennons and her Brenes and her Oprahs to try to be more present in her life. But back when this picture was taken, Julie was traveling Europe as a university graduation present to herself. She hit 14 countries in 6 weeks. And each time Julie arrived at a destination like the Leaning Tower of Pisa or the top of the Jungfrau in Switzerland, or in this case, the Eiffel Tower, she would run up to the iconic structure and she would say, there, I've embraced the moment. I want you to think about Julie when you think if you are ticking off your nutritional boxes. There, I gagged down my sludgy protein drink, nailed it. Or there, I ate another can of tuna before bed so I can say I met my protein goal for the day. Instead, please focus on making your choices just more consistent, more joyful, and really nutrient dense. Food will always be confusing because we will never stop receiving messages that try to convince us that we need to science the shit out of it. My wish for you today is that you can keep grounded in your choices by just returning to your nutritional touchstone. Now, because I had this opportunity, I decided to share with you my one last favorite video clip about menopause.
That was incredibly informative, and I can't wait to try this tofu. 8:01, we're actually on time, and there's Angie. Hi. Did you just get here? No. Okay.
I'm sitting in the back for a
Welcome.
little bit. Hi.
Here, there you go. Dive in. We're
Debbie
not done
Downer
yet.
up here. You know what? We're just gonna skip over this one. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about alcohol. Yeah, some of us know can worsen our symptoms, can help us feel better in the minute, but what's that?
I said amen, sister.
Yes, but it's not all bad. There's again the studies, nutrition studies. A glass of red wine, 5 ounces, may be beneficial daily. Not all at once though, just like 1 glass a day. But yeah, it's mostly bad. But if it's for your mental health and it's within reason, moderation. It's, you know, we're all just gonna go there. And coffee, of course, I think coffee is very, it can be a great stimulant. Sometimes at this point of our lives, we may be like, oh, it's past 12. If I have one, I'm gonna be up till 4 in the morning. Well, and not just coffee, but our chocolate-covered almonds and the other caffeinated things that we love. But it's not all bad. Caffeine can be good, but if it gives you palpitations, brings on a hot flash, then you might want to avoid it. And acid reflux, I know I get wicked gut rot if I haven't had much to eat. So I often get asked too, like, what is the best diet for menopause? What is the best one? And I always come back to, well, what are you doing right now? Right? So it's like, there's like every minute it's a new superfood. And if that was the superfood, then how is this new one the superfood? You know, we've got broccoli, we've got kale, we've got acai berries or whatever they're called, or, you know, and it's like, I don't even know what they're called. Anyway, acai. But if we're not, quinoa. I got corrected on that. Yeah. But if we're not doing the basics already, having the fruit and vegetables, having, you know, the whole grains, incorporating protein, however that looks, those superfoods, they're going to be great to add to it. But if we're not doing the basics already, then doing those fine tweaks, that precision nutrition isn't really going to matter. So And there's a lot to it, of course. So what is our existing nutrition knowledge and skills, which thank you, Alison, for enlightening us on so much of it. What foods do we have access to and can we afford? It's really big right now. And especially with all these stupid influencers like demonizing regular food. I'm like, I've started buying all kinds of frozen fruits and vegetables. I will buy canned stuff. Like, it's just cheaper. It's cheaper, it's more accessible. When my grocery bills went from $200 to $400, and as a single mom, that's hard. So we don't need to demonize these foods that are super nutritious. What foods are socially and culturally appropriate? That's a huge part of our life, like Alison said, right? We used to sit, and it was a time to gather. And how much time and attention do we have? Run into soccer practice. I'm going to be doing that 4 times a week. Run into the city. I'm going to get really good at meal prepping or eating Tim Hortons on the road.
Emergency kits.
Emergency kits,
yes.
When I have the energy to actually build them.
Yeah.
What's our household like? Our situation, our daily routines, our schedules, our demands, and of course our values and our priorities. Sometimes a glass of wine and the Tim Hortons is what it's going to be that day. And that's okay. So I always kind of say, I hate using the word diet, but diet is a thing, but it's like the list of things I can eat on my diet. And that's basically what you feel like when you start going down the rabbit hole of these kinds of nutrition paths. But the best one is the one that you'll stick to. So if you hop on a plan, is this sustainable for the rest of my life? Does it align with our values and our lifestyle and our goals? Got to check all those boxes too. And is it sustainable? So those are really that's the best diet for you. And intuitive eating. Am I hungry, or am I just am I sad? Am I bored? When I'm creating presentations, if I'm in front of the computer, I have to have something to snack on. It's a habit, and it's a terrible one. Or if I'm driving, it keeps me awake. And my ADHD brain from going all over the place. And following the shiny lights. Oh, look, something shiny. Yeah. And here's a great plate with lots of different examples on it. Half of your plate, all fruits and veggies. Some whole grains. What's that? That's the Canadian Food Guide plate. Mm-hmm. Actually, the one from theirs. Yeah.
Yes.
I know there's lots of rhetoric about the food triangle is wrong. It's like, well, we don't use the food triangle anymore. It's been gone for a while.
This is the
new one. Yeah. And if we're looking at just a little tip on portion sizes, I'm not sure if Alison talked about portion sizes, because I don't like to talk about weight either, because I don't think having weight or having fat is inherently bad or good unless it's affecting your health, and then it's a personal goal. But I'm always feel kind of remiss in not talking about it, because it is a huge concern for so many women at this stage of life. That 10 pounds that you packed on without even changing a thing, it's like, what in the hell is going on? And sometimes it's just the combination of, like we talked about before with exercise, we're not moving our bodies as much. We don't have as much muscle anymore to burn the calories, so we might have to adjust our portion sizes. So, there's lots of different ways to look at portion sizes. I use my hand. It's one that I learned from Precision Nutrition. So you've got, a cupped hand is like your carbs. A full hand is your fruits and vegetables. The protein portion is about the size of your palm, and a fat portion is about the size of your thumb. So when I'm eating a full bag of chocolate-covered almonds, that's way more than the size of my thumb, but I'm still loving it. So I'm fully aware of what I'm doing, and I just don't care.
And I do it anyway.
I still do it anyway. Yeah, I'm like, look at this magnesium that I'm getting in. Anyways, I know Alison's gonna have some great resources as well, and I'll check with you. But I've got some good portion, using the hand portion guide too, to give out. But yeah, thanks for letting me jump in halfway.
Yeah, no, I didn't even know there were extra slides, so I'm glad you came when you did.
I threw a couple because I we got to talk about booze.